Hello to you all beautiful and awesome Mindsetters, great 12 Mindsetters. My name is AB and I'm joined by Mr. Ashraf himself. How are you, sir?
Good, and you, AB?
I'm also good. You know what, today we're just learning a lot. There's no more talking. We're just learning because our Mindsetters have reached their final destination.
They have. It's the last 10-meter stretch. And whatever they can do in this 10-meter stretch will definitely affect the outcome at the end of the day.
But I believe it shouldn't just be a beginning of things. It should just rather a wrap of everything that you've learned.
We've worked very hard with them for the entire year.
So true.
This is just to put the final cherry on the top.
All right. I like that. We're doing accounting Mindsetters, but what are we doing today specifically?
We're looking at a question that has an income statement and a balance sheet and theory. So it's a broad spectrum question, and hopefully it would benefit our learners.
All right. And I believe also, Mindsetters, you have your own questions because tomorrow apparently you're writing your accounting. So all the best to you and Mr. Ashraf. Let's give them the best, hey?
Definitely. We always do. We give them the best, and
It's
we
up to them.
expect the best from them as well.
All right, and let me just give you some details for you to join us. Firstly, if you are doing your revision, let us know today, how did you write? Because we'd like to hear from you. Your first English paper, if you wrote well, let us know. Share on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/learnextra. Otherwise, follow us on Twitter @learnextra. But now we have this awesome competition, which is our Learn Extra Exam Score Marathon competition, whereby you stand a chance of winning this awesome Galaxy Note 8.0, proudly sponsored by Samsung. It has an S Pen, which is the one that I'm using. Very flexible. You can write with it, and it's just like your normal pen, and it has an 8.0 LCD screen. It's big enough for you to read and write at the same time because you're using your S Pen. And also it has a 1.6 gigahertz CPU, which is your central processing unit. It's very, very fast. And lastly, it has a multi-window whereby at the same time you can open a lot of things. You can have your pictures, you can have your notes, you can have a video at the same time. It's flexible as like that. To enter for the competition, simply go to mindset.co.za/learn/win. That's how we roll. We're going to be announcing a winner. We're going to be doing rather a draw on the next show, the Grade 10 show. But for today, as you are watching as a Grade 12 learner, we also have other exciting prizes for you, not only from Samsung, but Curio. Go to curio.co.za, register and take the challenge question. We'll go over it hopefully just on the few minutes before we end the show. But go to Curio and register right now. You could win other awesome prizes. Mr. Ashraf, over to you.
Thank you, AB. Okay, grade 12s, remember, you are now busy doing the final preparation for tomorrow's paper, okay? So, make sure that when you are planning your work, you've seen all our programs. As Mindsetters, you know exactly the work that we have covered. But look at today's question. Today's question is quite amazing because it deals with companies and financial statements and interpretation, and you find that in the first part of the question, it tells you here that you are provided with information from the accounting records of Mira Traders Limited. The financial year end is the 28th of February 2013. The company is registered with an authorized share capital of 700,000 Rand. What are you required? Watch the question. It starts with an appetizer. Right. Now, what's the appetizer? The appetizer is quite clear. It says here that briefly explain the GAAP principle that relates to doing adjustments at the end of the financial year. Now, obviously, you've dealt with a lot of the GAAP principles. This one specifically is dealing with the matching concept, okay? And what do we know about the matching concept? Remember, the matching concept as it relates to accounting, not the other people's ideas of making a match, eh, AB? Right, remember, it's the accounting concept of matching. What does it deal with, grade 12s? Mindsetters, remember that your matching concept deals with matching what? Your incomes against your expenses, right? And how do you match them? You match them within a given financial period. Okay, so now, at the same time, what is important for you to note is that this is just one accounting principle. There are many other accounting principles that you need to be familiar with. There are principles like the come, I'm sure you should be screaming out these answers. At this time of the year, you should surely be prepared. What are we talking about? We're talking about the entity concept, the business entity concept. We are talking about the prudence concept, to be conservative in your approach. And obviously, there are many others, the historical cost concept. Obviously, we can't go through all of them right now, but surely you should revise these and know exactly what concept deals with what. Okay, then if we move on with the question, we are told the following, that you are required to take the additional information, that means the adjustments into account, to complete the income statement, right? And you are given an income statement, but notice, with the income statement in this particular question here, the starting point is the gross profit. Okay? Obviously something different, because you are used to starting the income statement from the sales part. It doesn't really matter. All that it means is they've calculated the sales and the cost of sales. You are expected to start off at this point here, starting with the gross profit. Okay, let's go right into our adjustments and see what are the adjustments that we have to take into consideration. Number one, we are told that, let's get to the first adjustment. Okay, here goes. There was a physical stock take, and it revealed that the stock count at the end of the year was trading stock 29,300. Now, if that was your physical stock take, it means that you physically counted the stock and it amounted to 29,300. Okay, what do you compare this to? Check your information. What do you have here? The information that you have is the following. Let's get to our information page so we can find what we are looking for. Where is our information page? Let's find it. I'm sure our information page is here, right? And we look for the given information in terms of what appears in my trial balance. Here it is, right? So now, if I look at my trading stock figure, I find that in my trading stock is given to me as 32,800. Obviously, there's a discrepancy between what my trial balance is revealing and what my physical stock count is revealing. Remember that 32,800 minus the 29,300 will give me a stock difference of 3,500. In other words, what have I identified? I have identified a trading stock deficit. Okay, so let's go to the trading stock deficit, and immediately I see here under my expenses, right? What do I put in here? Trading stock deficit. Now remember, you are not going to abbreviate, and the amount that we calculated was 3,500. So we slot in the trading stock deficit of 3,500. Okay, so compare your physical stock take with the amount as it appears in your trial balance. Okay, next adjustment. The next adjustment, let's get to our adjustment. We are told the following. There's my income statement. There's my information. Here goes. Right, adjustment number, still busy with the first adjustment. We are told that consumable stores on hand amounted to 1,130. Okay, now, if that is the consumable stores on hand, that means that that consumable stores was not used up. It was left over at the end of the financial year. In other words, what are we going to say? We go here to our item, consumable stores. First step, open your bracket. Please, grade 12s, I'm begging you, make sure that you show your calculations in brackets. Right, now, what was my consumable stores figure? Let me identify that figure. Consumable stores, and the consumable stores figure is 7,330. Okay, so if that is 7,330, here goes consumable stores. 7,330 is a given figure in my trial balance that represents the amount of consumables that have been bought. Okay, now, in terms of my adjustment, what do I know? I know that, here it is, what am I told? Consumable stores amounted to 1,130. What's my double entry for that? Debit consumable stores on hand. Why? That's my asset account. A credit to consumable stores, 1,130. Therefore, if I'm crediting my consumable stores minus 1,330, okay? Immediately, I say, calculator, 7,330 minus 1,330, and my answer is 6,000 rand. That means that the amount of consumables that I used was 6,000 rand. Just be wary of the information that is provided. In this case, you were told that the information told you that the consumable stores on hand amounted to 1,130. That means I've got the wrong figure. Let's go back. I think I've got the wrong figure there. That's right, I do have a wrong figure. Let's change it. Okay, 1,130. You see how important it is to check? Just make sure that you always have the correct figure. Let's go back to our calculator, and we say 7,330 minus 1,130, and my answer is 6,200. Okay, so there goes. 6,200 is the amount of consumable stores that we utilized. In other words, what point am I making to you here? Please ensure that you read carefully, that you make the correct adjustment. As you can see, how easy it is to make a mistake. Please be wary of that. The other thing that I wanted to allude to was the fact that always check, are they telling you consumable stores on hand or consumable stores used? Watch out for that, grade 12s. Okay, let's go to the next adjustment. In terms of the next adjustment, what am I told? I'm told that the account of ex-payee, a debtor, must be written off as a bad debt, 830 rand. Obviously, you know the adjustment, but there's something else that I want to bring to your attention. Look at this here. Because the question expected you to do the note trade and other receivables, you know for sure that you have the item here, debtors control. Correct? Let me just write it in so you can see what I'm talking about. And in my debtors control, obviously, I would start off with the balance of the information as it was given to me. In terms of my debtors control figure is 17,530. Therefore, 17,530 is the beginning of my balance as it appears in my trial balance. Okay, and I'm told that I must write off the account of a debtor. What am I told about the information? Let's get to the information. We are told that we have to write off the account of a debtor as irrecoverable 830 rand. Let's identify the double entry. Very important. What's my double entry? A debit to bad debts. Therefore, if I go in here and I say, under my expenses, I've got an expense now called bad debts. Remember, if the amount had to appear as a balance in the trial balance, that would be your first figure. But since there's no figure, the amount was, let's just identify the amount correctly, and the amount of the bad debt was 830 rand. Therefore, under my bad debts, I put in my amount of 830 rand. But what I want you to see is the double entry. It's a debit to bad debts. At the same time, it's a credit to debtors control. In other words, here, watch this here. Here, you're saying credit to debtors control minus an amount of, and the amount was 830 Rand. Okay, so therefore, you can see minus 830 Rand. Watch, what am I doing? I'm working simultaneously. Why? The question expected a trade and other receivables, and in this particular question, it also expected a balance sheet. So ideally, when you do a particular adjustment, do it in both places. Therefore, if you look at this here, you could actually say that under my current assets, under my inventories, I could actually put in the amount of my trading stock. And what was the amount of my trading stock? It was 29,300. Remember, we did that adjustment already. So therefore, what we're saying here is open the bracket, 29,300 for inventories, plus the amount for my consumable stores on hand was 1,130. Therefore, I can add the 1,130 there as well. What I want you to see, grade 12s, is the method in which I am working with both the adjustment in the income statement and in the balance sheet. Amy, is it time up already?
Yes, it's just time for the break.
I didn't
No
even
time up
realize
yet.
it, guys. Remember, take a breather, make sure you refresh yourselves, and you're back. And we want your mind, your body, and your soul.
Awesome. Remember to go to kiro.co.za. Your code for today is AC12. AC12. That's your code for Kiro, and you could win some awesome prizes. But in the meantime, keep those great comments coming on the Facebook page and your questions. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back, Mindsetters. Still to enter for the competition, remember you've got now an hour, 10 minutes before we close, because at 5 on the next show, we'll be doing the next draw for the Samsung Galaxy 8.0. So stand a chance. Go to mindset.co.za/learn/win and stand that chance. But in the meantime, Mr. Ashraf, we have some questions.
Okay. Yes, guys, there are plenty questions coming through, and thank you for that. It shows that you are working with your accounting. It shows that you are preparing for your exam earnestly and really putting your minds to it. What we're going to be doing is some of the questions that you have asked are related to the question that we are working on. So you would find your answers coming through, right? Those questions, there are other questions which we will leave for the last segment, and definitely we will try and cover as best and as most of the questions as possible. So don't fear when Ashraf is near, Amy. We will try and get through all your questions, but as I said, let's continue with this question because we're into it, and many of the questions that you have asked would be answered by doing these adjustments. So don't stray or go away. The place to be, Mindset Learn.
Exactly, where you learn more and learn extra. Let me just also give you this, just as a token of appreciation from Mindsetters, and for me, just being a good guy, I'll be giving you guys the race number for today. I'll just be sharing it. It's going to be somewhere on the page. I'm just going to be a fake guy, so that, because you need that race number for you to fill in the entry form. So I'll be giving it to them.
Perfect, Amy. Brilliant.
Right.
You're a good
Let's
guy.
continue.
Okay, guys, let's continue with our adjustments. Right, as I was saying, remember, work simultaneously on a question of this nature because you've got to complete the income statement and the balance sheet. Okay, let's go back to our adjustment and see what do we now have. We are told that we've dealt with, oh yes, very important, very, very important. Once you are completed with an adjustment, delete it to tell yourself that you've now entered it in both places. So this means that you know you're done with that adjustment. So that one is done and that one is done. Let's look at the next one. 400 Rand received from Why Bother, a debtor whose account was previously written off, was posted to the debtor's control account. This must still be corrected. Okay, now remember, when a debtor is written off, as you had seen the entry that we had processed when we did this particular one, what was my double entry? To recap, a debit to bad debts and a credit to debtor's control. Now, when a debtor subsequently pays you, it has absolutely nothing to do with debtor's control. The correct double entry is a debit to bank. We're receiving the mullah. Yes, we're receiving the money. So it's a debit to bank and a credit to bad debts recovered. But in this particular instance, what have they done? They have posted it to the debtor's control account incorrectly. So how would we correct this error? Yes, grade 12s. This will be corrected in the following manner. What is it? A debit to debtor's control. In other words, what am I saying? When I say a debit to debtor's control, I'm saying plus 400. Okay? It's a debit to debtor's control plus 400. A credit to my correct entry now. Which one is that? Bad debts recovered. In other words, under my incomes, I'm going to have an item called bad debts recovered. And yes, that is where you're going to put in the 400 Rand, where it's supposed to be an income. Okay, so in this way, you can see that we have now corrected the double entry. And watch, in the income statement under incomes, because that is an income account, bad debts recovered, and at the same time, in my balance sheet, under the item, you got it right? Yes, under debtors control, plus 400 Rand. Right, done and dusted. Next adjustment. After taking into account the adjustments involving debtors, the provision for bad debts must be adjusted to 5% of debtors. Right, in other words, now go to my debtors figure and say, there's my debtors control figure. Let's take out our calculators, and the figure is 17,530, right, minus the 830 plus the 400, and this will give me a figure of 17,100. Now, your provision for bad debts must be adjusted on that figure of 17,100. What's my double entry? We'll come to the double entry. Let's do the calculation first. Obviously, 17,100 times my percentage, and my answer is, I got an error there. Let's go back. 17,100 times 5%, and my answer is 855. In other words, what do I know? I know that my new provision has to be 855 Rand. In other words, watch here. What am I saying? I'm saying provision for bad debts, and the amount is, as per my calculation, 855 Rand. Notice that provision for bad debts, the new figure has to be 855 Rand. Now, grade 12s, ask yourself the question, what type of an account is provision for bad debts? Remember, provision for bad debts is what we refer to as a negative asset. Allow me to explain. What is a negative asset? A negative asset decreases the value of your asset. In other words, if you recall, we had a figure here of 17,100. You remember? Let's go back and verify that figure. There's it, 17,100. In other words, 17,100, and now I say 17,100 minus, why? Because it's a negative asset, decreasing the value of my asset. Minus 855 will now give me a figure of 16,245. And what is the 16,245? That is what we refer to as our net trade debtors. Now, that's just part of the entry. Now, if my provision is now standing at 855, let me go back and see what was my original provision. My provision at the beginning of the year was 1075. Okay, in other words, you can see that your provision is decreasing. It's coming down. You had a provision of 1075. You only need a provision of 855. In other words, watch here. We say the provision for bad debts was 1075. So we say 1075 minus the provision that we have was that we need is 855. and therefore there's an amount of 220 Rand. Let's just verify if those figures are correct. Remember, my new provision has to be an amount of 855. In other words, that figure is correct. The old provision was 1075, the new one is 855. In other words, my provision must be decreased by 220 Rand. Now, when your provision for bad debts is being decreased, that means you are debiting provision for bad debts. You are debiting the negative asset. Why? You are decreasing it in value. And if you are doing that, what account are you going to credit? And that's the important part. We're going to credit the provision for bad debts adjustment. Now, when you credit your provision for bad debts adjustment, your adjustment is an income. Watch this very closely. Under my incomes, I'm going to put here provision for bad debts adjustment. Remember, I said it's an income. An income of how much? An income of 220 Rand, and therefore would feature under my incomes. Just as an explanation, if the provision was greater than 1075, that means you have to increase the provision for bad debts, then your adjustment account would be an expense. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we sorted with that adjustment. Let's move on. That's the one that somebody asked for, AB. You remember the rent story?
Yes.
Okay, here it is. Here's the rent adjustment. What are we told? So that one is dealt with. We can delete it. Rent income for February 2013 was not yet received. In other words, if you look at your financial year, it constitutes 12 months. They are telling you that the rent for February 2013 was not yet received. We haven't received it as yet. Perfect. Take into account that the rent increased by 360 Rand per month as of the 1st of September 2012. Okay, now comes the calculation part of it. Let's go through the calculation part of it and see what are we going to do. Okay, firstly, identify your rent income. My rent income is 51,300. Okay, so if that is my rent income, 51,300, watch, take your 51,300 as the starting figure, 51,300. What do we know? There was an increase in my rental of 360 Rand per month with effect from the 1st of September. So count the months involved. September, October, November, December, January. 5 months. Why am I not including February? Because you are told that the rent for February was not yet received. So 5 months rental you have received of the new rental. Keep that in mind. Right, let's take that. And we say, okay, 51,300, let's take out our calculator and we say there was an increase in the rental of 360 Rand. Therefore, we say 360 times 5 to give me a value of 1,800. What do? Watch this here. Minus 1,800. What am I doing here, grade 12s? I'm leveling the playing fields. I'm ensuring that all the months are made equal. I cannot divide 51,300 by 11 because the 11 months were not equal. So what am I doing now? I'm first making them equal by doing what? By taking out the increased amount. There it goes. 51,300 minus the 1,800, and we have 51,300 minus 1,800, and my answer is 49,500. Now, what have I done? I've now made all the months equal. How many months? 49,500 divided by 11. Okay, so divided by 11, and your answer is 4,500. What is the 4,500? The 4,500 is your rental prior to the increase, prior to the 1st of September. The rental income was 4,500. What do I now do? I add the increase amount of 360. So I say plus 360, and this will give me a figure of, once again, plus 360 is equal to 4860. There, voila. What do we have? We have the rental of the 1 month that we have not yet received as yet. Okay, now let's identify the double entry. In other words, in my income statement, notice I've got rent income, 51,300 as my given figure. Remember, I identified that figure. What's my double entry? A debit to accrued income. What is accrued income? Accrued income is a temporary debtor. It's somebody who owes us money. Therefore, what will I do? I'll say, go into my balance sheet and say, under my trade and other receivables, I now have accrued income of, and the amount was 4,860. Notice, open my bracket, 4860, a debit to accrued income. It's an asset account increasing in value, therefore debited, and I will then credit my rent income with 4860, watch here, plus 4860, and immediately I can finalize my figure, 4860 plus, let's go back, 51,300 plus 4860, and my final figure is 56160. 56160. There goes grade 12s. Notice what I've done. I've processed my double entry by doing what? By debiting accrued income. Here it is under my debtors. So I need to know my note as well. What appears under trade and other receivables? It's debtors control, less provision for bad debts to give me net trade debtors. What do I add to it? Accrued income, prepaid expenses, deposit on water and electricity, and SARS income tax if it has a debit balance. So what's critical is for you to know that this is what goes into my note, trade and other receivables. Yes, I'm sure some of you are sitting there and saying, there's another item that you've left out. Which one is that? It's the insurance claim. Remember, also an asset appearing under trade and other receivables. I think we're at the end of the segment, AB.
Yes, we are. Unfortunately.
The time is just rolling on. There's just no time for... But anyway, guys, stay tuned to Mindset, because we're going to make a difference to that accounting result.
So true, and remember, if you're stuck anywhere, go to our help desk, which is also on Mixit. You can download it, add it as an app. We can help you also there. But otherwise, we have some study groups, online groups for you, Mindsetters. So if you are doing accounting, of which you are doing because you're watching right now, your group is on Facebook. You just search for Mindset Accounting, all one word, and join that group. Ask some questions and also help other Mindsetters on that group. But for now, we'll see you after this break. Welcome back, Mindsetters. Now, spreading the love. We have some Mindsetters that are spreading their love on our Facebook page, and we just want to acknowledge you, like Ntawiseng and Kilebocheng, Kels Mulife, saying, wow, such generosity from Samsung. We appreciate. Remember, you can still enter for the competition. The race number is somewhere on the page, so look for it. It's on the page, and use it on the entry form on mindset.co.za/learn/win. Mr. Ashraf,
yes,
we don't have time.
We don't have time.
Yes.
Hey, let's go into the question.
Yes.
Okay. Notice, Mindsetters, that we're doing the adjustments, but I'm not going to do the totaling of the total operating, because obviously that is just basically what you're going to do is add your incomes, add your expenses. So we'd rather do the adjustments so that you understand the adjustments, and obviously the finalizing of those amounts, surely you can do that by yourselves. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right into the next adjustment, and let's see what we have. Okay, with regards to the next adjustment, you are told that half the insurance paid relates to the next financial year. So immediately, the first thing that you do is you go to your insurance, identify your insurance figure. Let's find it. There it is. insurance is 6,400, okay? And then into my income statement, notice the insurance figure, it's written for me there, open my bracket, the amount is 6,400. Okay, so identify step number 1, identify the insurance amount, put the amount in the bracket. Start off with that figure. Half the amount relates to the next financial year. In other words, all that you're going to do is divide that amount by 2, because 6,400 for half the year, obviously if you divide it by 2, your answer is 3,200, and that becomes your final answer. Identify the double entry. What's my double entry? It's a debit to prepaid expenses and a credit to insurance. Therefore, minus 3,200, as you can see, that results in that figure being 3,200. So at the same time, what you now need to realize is that if you go into your note, trade and other receivables, you've got prepaid expenses and the amount, open your bracket, 3,200. Okay, so what have I done? I've processed my double entry, debiting prepaid expenses and crediting my insurance. Done and dusted. Next adjustment. Okay, the next adjustment says, interest on the fixed deposit for the last quarter of the financial year was not received. Note that the 50,000 Rand was invested on the 1st of March 2012. Now, whenever it comes to interest income, remember there are 2 options. Either your interest can be capitalized or you could be receiving your interest. So please be aware of both methods for the exams. Now in this case here, they're telling you that the interest for the last quarter of the financial year was not received. In other words, interest is not being capitalized. We are receiving the interest. And when we received the interest, what was my double entry? When I received the interest, I debited bank, why? Asset increasing in value, and I credited my interest on investment, why? It was an income account increasing the equity, therefore credited. In other words, notice now that I go to my trial balance and I see there interest on investment, there it is, 4125. Now, the 4125, what does it represent? 4125. They told you interest for the last quarter has not been received. And when we're talking about a quarter, we are talking about a quarter of 12. And a quarter of 12 is 3 months. So in other words, if I divide this by 3, what do I get? I get a figure of 1375 per quarter. Understand that. Okay? What else could I have done? Watch. I could also say 4125. I think that was my figure. Let's just verify. 4125 divide by 9. And my answer is, let's just take that figure again. One more time. 4125. Obviously, you'll see a rounding factor coming in. The easiest way to determine this is your 4125 has been received for 3 quarters, right? So if you take 3 quarters into account, 4125 divide by 3 will tell you it's 1375 per quarter for every 3 months. Okay, you'll notice that with the 9, you'll get a decimal, but when you multiply at the end, it should be rounded. Okay, in other words, there's an amount of 1375 outstanding on the investment. Identify your double entry. What's my double entry? It's a debit to accrued income, which I already have. Recall this. Notice you have an accrued income plus 1375. Okay, so you are debiting accrued income. What are you crediting? You are crediting the interest on the investment. Now, watch this here. When it comes to your interest on your investment, there you got your interest income. Open your bracket and the figure that you are looking for is interest on the investment. Let's identify it. The interest on investment, 4125. Therefore, notice that interest 41. Let's get that figure right. 4125 plus, what figure did we calculate? 1375. 1375, and obviously you would edit, and that would give you your final amount for your interest income. Okay, now in this particular case here, you can clearly see that your interest was not capitalized, right? In other words, the interest was not being added to the investment, rather we were receiving it, and therefore in this case here it's an accrued income. So once again, debit accrued income, credit your interest on interest income. Now one more thing that you need to take note of is the fact that interest income appears at the bottom of your income statement. It is not part of my other incomes. Notice here that it is not part of my other incomes. It has a special place, and the reason for that, grade 12s, is that interest income is part of financing and not part of operating. Okay, let's go on to the next adjustment. So we've sorted that one out. The interest on investment is done. Let's look at the interest on loan. An interesting question. What are we told? Interest on the loan is capitalized. Remember, we alluded to that word earlier on when we spoke about the interest on the investment. Okay, now the interest on the loan is capitalized on the 28th of February 2013. The current year's interest is included. Now, I'm sure, AB, do you remember what this stands for?
Read.
In one of our shows we did this.
I think it's read, tabulate.
Read the
Following
full
questions. Yeah.
And we said we're not going to use the expletive. Right? Because when we're angry, we may not say read the full question. We may use another word. But we're not going to be using that word, AB. Okay? We're just going to concentrate on read the full question. What did it say? It said that the current year's interest is included in the loan balance above. Right? So important information, AB.
Yes.
It's included. Let's look at the figure. What are we told here? Watch there. It says here, loan from Sandy Bank, 12.5%, and the amount is 135,000. Now, grade 12s, what you need to identify is the fact that the loan, the interest on loan, has been capitalized. In other words, it has been added to the loan. So this loan figure that you see there is a closing balance, and that's important. So in other words, in terms of my calculations, what am I going to do? This is what I'm going to do here. Watch. 135,000 is equal to what in terms of percentages? It is equal to 112.5%. Why am I saying that? Notice here that you are told that your loan was at an interest rate of 12.5%. In other words, the interest on loan has been added to the loan, meaning that we now are sitting with a figure of 112.5%. Why? Because the interest has been added. 100% was the loan, plus the 12.5 interest has been added, therefore 112.5%. In other words, what are you looking for? You are looking for the 100%, which is equal to your unknown. Cross multiply, and you will find that 135,000 times 100 divided by 112.5, and there is your answer, 120,000. What is the 120,000, grade 12s? The 120,000 is your loan amount, excluding the interest. Therefore, your double entry that needed to be processed as follows was a debit to interest expense, because that's what we need, isn't it? So therefore, in my income statement, right, under my interest expense, open my bracket, and the figure that I'm looking for would be the 15. Let's find that figure. 120 was the loan amount, including the interest was 135. Obviously, you subtract 135 and you take 120,000 away from it, you are left with a figure of 15,000 rand. Therefore, you can clearly see that the figure that you need here for your interest expense is 15,000 rand. Now, looking back at the question, what else do they tell you there? Right? They're telling you that the loan is repayable on the 1st of March of each year. How much of the loan? 18,000 of the loan is repayable on the 1st of March of each year. In other words, what am I now going to do? Okay, important information that I need to use. There's my loan, Sandy Bank. Open the bracket, 135,000 is my closing balance of the loan. I am told that 18,000 will be paid within the next financial period. In other words, what do I know? The moment I'm told what amount will be paid within the next 12 months, it ceases to be a non-current liability. It changes to a current liability. Minus the 18,000, okay, that's the non-current decreases by 18,000. At the same time, under my current liabilities, I've got here short-term loan, and the amount is a figure of 18,000 rand. Very important, grade 12s, that whenever you are working with a loan, separate the loan into two components. What are the two components? Yes, I'm owing an amount of 135,000. However, 18,000 of that will have to be repaid within the next financial period. In other words, it changes its positioning. It changes from where? From becoming a non-current liability, it now moves to a current liability, and the item is current portion of the loan or the short-term loan, and the amount is 18,000 rand. At this point, I'm not sure whether this question asks for it. I don't. It does. The fixed deposit is given to you, right? So I just want to explain a little bit further on the fixed deposit as well. In this case, it's a given figure. There's nothing to worry about. It's hunky-dory. It's fine. However, if you are given information on a fixed deposit as well, that a portion of the fixed deposit will mature within the next financial year, then that also needs to change its position. And where does it change from? It changes from being a financial asset into my cash and cash equivalents. So that rule applies to your fixed deposit, the portion that is maturing within 12 months, as well as the loan. Remember, separate it into the two legs of the loan, the non-current and the current. Well, Abby, another session over already.
Yes, of course. And I like Angelica's comment rather on the RTFQ, reading the 4 questions. Just have to love mindset for that. Otherwise, here's a great comment before we go to that break.
Please,
I think
please,
we really
please.
need this one.
Yes.
From Kayla Harris, she says, if Mindset Learn Extra didn't exist, I would be failing my accounting tomorrow. Thanks for the revision programs.
You're
Thank you.
welcome, and make sure that you put your mind to it, mindsetters. We want those A's in accounting, and yes, you can do it.
Oh yes, team mindset, that's the spirit. Otherwise, keep the spirit. Take the challenge question on Curio. It is on curio.co.za, or you can also get it and mix it. The details are posted on Facebook. And some people are asking, what is the race number for? Well, it's for the competition if you'd like to win the Galaxy 8.0, proudly brought to you by Samsung. Going the distance together. See you after the break. Welcome back, Mindsetters. Now, a lot of us are having a bad attitude when it comes to accounting because we think it's a lot of work and we often say that it is impossible. But rather, just want to leave you with these words that nothing is ever impossible in life because the word itself says that I am possible. So that's the mentality we should treat also when it comes to accounting.
Absolutely. When you walk into that exam room tomorrow morning, make sure that you have the correct BMT. AB?
What is that?
BMT. You must have big match temperament. Don't be a choker. Right? When you walk into that exam room tomorrow, make sure that you're ready to ace that paper. And yes, you can.
Exactly.
Believe in yourselves. You can achieve it.
So in accounting, almost everything has matching, hey?
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, let's get right into the question. Let's
Right.
continue. We are told that depreciation for the year amounts to 34375. It's a given figure. We know that generally that depreciation you may have to calculate it at times. In this particular question, it's a given figure. Double entry, debit depreciation, credit accumulated depreciation. In this case here, looking at my givens, what do I need in terms of my income statement? Right? I'm going to write it in depreciation, and the figure was 34375. If I just verify that figure quickly for you, that figure for depreciation was 34375. Okay, so we got our depreciation figure of 34375. Okay, it's a given figure, so obviously you just take it and insert it into your income statement. In terms of the balance sheet, let's check were we required to do anything with the tangible assets. Was a given figure, so obviously there's nothing to do in terms of the accumulated depreciation. However, remember that if you were asked to do note number 3, which is the tangible assets note, then yes, bring in your depreciation into that note as well. Right, moving on with our adjustments. We are told that the income tax for the year amounts to 22475. Right, double entry. Debit income tax 22475. Let's check the income statement. Can you see? It's done for you already, so you debited the income tax. It's there, 22475, debit to income tax. What's the contra entry? It's a credit to SARS income tax. Now, take note of the following. What do we know? We can clearly see that. Look at my given information. What do I have here? SARS income tax provisional payments. They're telling you, the examiners were kind to you here, indicating to you that it's a debit of 20,000 Rand. In other words, grade 12s, what's my double entry? A debit to income tax and a credit to SARS income tax. In other words, if you look at your information, watch this closely now. What do we have here? If this is my SARS income tax account, right? And remember, it's a calculation with a debit of 20,000. Debit SARS, that's from the trial balance. And in terms of the adjustment, what was my adjustment? The adjustment was 22,475, debit income tax, credit SARS income tax 22,475. So what do I do here? Credit SARS income tax with 22,475. Notice that if you balance this account, you are left with a balance of 2475. In this case here, it's a credit balance, meaning that you are still owing SARS an amount of 2475. And what are you going to do with that figure? Remember that in your balance sheet, under your current liabilities, you're going to show SARS income tax. You could show it as a separate figure, or you could include it under your note, trade and other payables. Remember that. What is important to note is that you could show SARS income tax as a separate item, Or if you include it under your trade and other payables, no sweat, it will definitely be marked as a liability. The amount was 2475. Okay, so we've sorted with that one. Let's go to the next adjustment. The next adjustment said that a final dividend of 8,800 was declared. There was no additional shares issued in this financial year. Right, now latching on to one of the questions that we had there, AB.
Yes.
One of our grade 12 mindsetters asked the question, what happens with new shares that are issued during the year? Do they qualify for a dividend? That depends entirely on the question. What do I mean by that? If the question specifies that new shares were sold during the year, and these new shares do not qualify for the interim dividend or the final dividend, depending on the question, what you have to do is RTFQ. Read the full question and see exactly what direction are you given regarding the dividends of those new shares that were issued during this financial year. So the answer to you is very clear. See what information is given to you. If the new shares qualified for a dividend, yes, they would then qualify. So therefore we said, and the terminology that we use is the following. If the shares are sold ex-dividend, that means they were sold excluding, you would be told that they do not qualify for a dividend. If the shares were sold cum dividend, that means cumulative, from the word cumulative. That means they were sold with a dividend, but the question will specify to you whether they qualify for a dividend or not. So that should sort out your problem. AB, I'm sure we've answered that letter.
Question,
so
yes.
as you can see, we said in our explanation of this particular question, we would answer other questions as well. Right, coming back to my final dividend. A final dividend of 8,800 was declared. Remember, when you declare a dividend, what are your two accounts involved? You're debiting ordinary share dividends, which is your expense account, and you're crediting your liability. Which liability? Shareholders for dividends. Right, now, let's do that. Oh yes, very, very important. Dividends, grade 12s, do not, I repeat, do not appear in my income statement. That is one expense of a company that appears in which figure? Remember, in the note, retained income. We're getting there. So understand, it does not impact on my income statement, but rather it impacts on my balance sheet, namely the retained income note. Okay, now let's look at the shareholders for dividends. In terms of my balance sheet, like I told you earlier on, your shareholders for dividends, you could show it separately as a separate item, or you could have included it under your trade and other payables, right? Generally, you find that under my current liabilities, I have 3 items. What are those 3 items? Those 3 items are 1, trade and other payables. Number 2, the short-term loan. And number 3, we're coming to that one, and I'm sure, I hope so, that you know that the 3rd item is a bank overdraft, if applicable. However, if you find that you could, for example, if one candidate showed you trade and other payables with these 2 items, the shareholders for dividends was 8,800. Let's just verify that figure to make sure we have the correct figure. That's right, 8,800. So in other words, let me show you the different permutations here, the different calculations. Shareholders for dividends was 8,800. Now, if you as a matriculant took the SARS income tax plus the shareholders for dividends and you included it under trade and other payables, absolutely, there's no problem with that. It would definitely be marked correctly. Okay, now, just another point while we're going through all of this. Remember that, like I said earlier on, it's pointless me now adding up and putting figures here. What is important for you to note, and with reference to your income statement as well. Notice here that when you add up your other incomes, and if you got a total year, no matter what you're let me be very clear in what I say. I don't want you to misconstrue or misunderstand what I'm saying. Had you made a mistake with any one of these components, but the fact that you added up these figures, you would get what we refer to as a method mark. Now, obviously, the operation needs to be correct. You must be adding and not subtracting funny things there. And obviously, this figure here needs to be reasonable. Okay? Now, reasonable, 56,000, 56,200, 57,000 plus minus 50. That's a reasonable figure. If now you went write a figure there of 940,000, surely that is not reasonable. And in that case here, you will see you would not be allotted the method mark. So what we are saying is that once you have completed your income statements, then when you are adding, definitely you would earn the method marks if your operation is correct and the figure is reasonable. Right. Okay, coming back to my balance sheet, what am I told here? That, okay, I was explaining the concept of whether you included the item under trade and other payables or you showed them individually. In both cases, you would earn the marks. Next item I said, what appears under current liabilities? Let's check. What do we know? If we look at our bank figure, it clearly specifies bank overdraft, telling you that there is a liability of 9,900. What does this mean, grade 12s? This means that when you come to your balance sheet, remember that the 9,900 is your bank overdraft, and therefore you would include it as part of your, the 9,900 would be included as part of your current liabilities because we are owing the bank the money. Is that clear? Obviously, does this mean that if you look at your balance sheet here, does this mean that you do not have cash and cash equivalents? No. There are other components of the cash and cash equivalents. What are those components? Those components are your bank and, sorry, not your bank because your bank is an overdraft, but your petty cash and your cash float and what we alluded to earlier on, that portion of the fixed deposit that is maturing within 12 months would also be included under your item cash and cash equivalents. Right. Now, there's a very important component of this balance sheet, which is your retained income. Now, what makes up your retained income? Remember, you would start off with your retained income at the beginning of the year. So in other words, take your balance of your retained income, notice the date, right? And like I always say, dates are very important. Which dates am I referring to? The dates in your accounting paper. And yes, the dates that you eat as well, AB, are very nourishing. They have a lot of proteins and chemicals that are good for you, right? So those are the dates we're referring to. The other dates, it's not time for that now. We'll leave that for after the exams.
Yeah, I love these terminologies.
Okay.
For real.
Okay, guys, look at my retained income. Beginning of the year, 34,500. In other words, go to your retained income and we say 34,500 as my opening balance. In other words, you start off with your opening balance of, where's my retained income? There it is, 34,500. What do I add to it? I add a figure which we say net income after tax. Okay? Maybe I'm just going to take a sip of water, please.
All right.
If you could just keep the mindset is busy for a few seconds.
No
I'll be
problem.
back.
I need to tell you about the Curio assessment. It's very much important, mindsetters. If you think you're ready for tomorrow, take that challenging question and let's see. Remember, it is on curio.co.za and your your registration number rather, it is AC12. So make sure that you go via your website or go via Mixit. You can also add Kiro on your Mixit. Take that assessment and let's see if you understand and ready for tomorrow. It's all about a positive attitude from us to you, mindsetters. Otherwise, for now, keep those questions coming because I'm sure Ashraf is going to give you some chance to get back to your questions.
Definitely. As soon as I download this retained income figure, we're going to take those questions that have come through. And I must be honest with you, there has been a flood of questions.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now you've seen that I've added the figure, and this is your net income after tax. Obviously, where does this come from? It comes from your income statement. Now, perchance if you had made an error in your income statement, this would be a method mark, as long as the operation was you were adding it. Okay, let's bring it back there. That's where it's supposed to be. Right, what else do? I subtract my dividends. Now, let's check the dividends. What was my dividend story? Remember, I had a dividends of 13,200. That was my interim dividend that was paid. Therefore, a debit to ordinary share dividends and a credit to bank. Now, another question that was asked, how do we calculate the dividends that have been paid for cash flow purposes? Grade 12s, I'm going to show you today a shortcut. What is the shortcut to calculating the dividends paid? Two figures. What are those two figures? Last year's final plus this year's interim. Those are your two bank figures that you need for cash flow purposes. I repeat, last year's final, there was a balance that you were owing, which you're going to be paying this year, and this year's interim. Those two figures you add together, and those are your two bank components, indicating the amount of dividends that have been paid. Operative word, paid. Okay, coming back to this question. So, if that was my 13,200, do you recall we declared a final dividend of 8,800? So therefore, if we say 13,200 plus the 8,800 of the final dividend to give me a total dividend figure of 22,000, therefore, mindsetters, watch this here. Minus your dividend of 22,000. Remember, once again, I'm referring specifically to the retained income note. In your retained income note, you've got two components. Interim dividend that was paid, in this case, would be the figure that we had spoken about, the 13,200, and the final dividend that was declared would be an amount of 8,800. And I'm sure if you go about answering the questions in this way, definitely you're going to be a shining star. Just not a shining star.
You'll be a shining diamond.
No, it's going to be Ashraf's and Avi's shining stars.
Nice one.
Okay, guys, let's go to some of the questions that you've asked. One of the questions that was posed was, how do we deal with materials or raw materials that have been stolen from a factory? Very simple, guys. Very, very simple. Watch this carefully. Watch this carefully. Right? Think of it this way here. Here's your raw materials account, right? And if the raw materials are stolen, surely you're going to debit an expense account. Say 10,000 Rand was stolen, debit your expense account, and you credit your raw materials with 10,000 Rand. What is happening? Your raw materials account is a balance sheet account. It's a stock account. And it decreases on the credit side. Here you can see raw materials stolen, and you're crediting your raw materials account, and you are debiting your expense account. You've now incurred an expense of raw materials that were stolen. Okay, another one. Another question based on manufacturing that you have asked for. Let's go through that one as well. The question was, how do you deal with finished goods that were stolen? Once again, ask yourself the question, which account am I dealing with? I'm dealing with my finished goods stock account. A balance sheet account, grade 12s. So, you see, what you have to do in accounting is always relate to previous knowledge. When goods are stolen in a business and we have a trading stock account, what's my double entry? Debit loss due to theft. So I have an expense account. Once again, same principle. Debit it with 1,000 rand because it's an expense, decreasing the equity. Debit it. Credit my finished goods stock account with 1,000 rand. You can see it's an asset account decreasing in value, therefore credited. Okay, so that's how you deal with goods that were stolen, whether it be material or whether it be a finished goods that were stolen. Is there another question there, Avi?
Yes, I have another question. Lots of questions.
Go for it.
Let's take this one from Afigile Fok. That's his surname.
Right.
He says, so if SARS income tax is paid fully a year, are we to include it as expense in the balance sheet or income statement?
Okay, very simple. I'll take you back to our question and explain it to you so you can clearly see what has happened. Notice here, in our question, we have, there's the figure, SARS income tax, a balance of 20,000, a debit balance. What does that mean? That means that for the year, we have made provisional payments, and therefore, if you can see it here, I'm sure we have it, there I have it, there's your debit balance indicating the payments that you have made to SARS. Now, what was your expense for the year? What did we say? We said debit income tax, you remember, with 22475, and credit SARS income tax with 22475. In other words, sir, what we are saying that you have underpaid SARS. You've paid them 20,000, but your expense was 22,475. In other words, you're still owing them 2,475. Let's take another scenario. Let's take another scenario here, in the same one here. Let's do this here so you can see what I'm saying. Let's assume that we had paid them 30,000 rand. So, on the debit side, that's your bank figure. But your expense was only 25,000 rand. Notice now that your payments are greater than your expense. In this case here, you're going to have a debit balance of 5,000 rand, and therefore critical, especially for cash flow purposes. When you start off with the calculation of your taxation paid, what you do is look at the status of your SARS account. What is the status of my SARS account? Why do I say that? Because your SARS account, clearly from this year, could either have a debit balance or it could have a credit balance. Why? Because if it has a debit balance, it means that SARS owes us money. So therefore, when you are working with SARS income tax, please ensure that you're checking the debit and whether it's appearing under receivables or payables. Another one, AB, we have a few.
A very quick one. Tapelo says she's confused on the reconciliation, rather scared, and how can she best cover that reconciliations?
When it comes to reconciliations, my advice to you is always identify the error that has been made. And if you can do that, I promise you half your battle is won. If you know that in my reconciliation, this is where, for example, if you are doing the debtors recon, right? Or you're doing the creditors recon, identify where the error has been made. And in that way, once you identify that the error is in my creditors list, then you know exactly that is where it needs to be corrected. Just on that point, a very quick one. Let's see if we can get this here. Remember, in your creditors list, if an amount was supposed to be on the credit side of 100 rand, right? And because it went to the wrong side, the entry had to be on the debit side. By you merely putting 100 on the debit side, all that you are doing is you are cancelling the other one out. So remember that if it went to the incorrect side, in order to correct it, you need to double it on the correct side. This would then give you the desired effect. Unfortunately, mindsetters, it's that time where we have to say goodbye for 2013.
And all the best.
And what are we saying? We are saying once again, we've really put our heart and soul into preparing you for this exam. And we are confident that you're going to walk away out of tomorrow's paper at 12 o'clock when you finish. You're going to say A for accounting and A for away, because we want you to be, like Ashraf always says, aim for the moon, guys. If you don't get there, definitely you're going to be a shining star. And not just an ordinary shining star, but Ashraf's shining star. Until, I don't know when. Be good?
Thank you so much. An A for Ashraf.
An A for Ashraf and an A for AB.
Thank you so
Right.
much, Mr. Ashraf. It's been a great year, and thank you for all the hard work and the commitment.
It's only a pleasure.
All the mindsetters are going to make you proud, trust me.
Definitely they would.
Otherwise, stay tuned, mindsetters, for the next show, because we'll be giving away one of these. This is so cool. From us to you, we just want to say to all the accounting buffins, all the best.
Cheers.